Hi everyone. Today we will be talking about the French and Indian War. Uh, if you look at this picture, it shows you what the United States used to look like. There's a little bit of Canada up here as well, but if you can see, Spain was in a little bit of the United States. France controlled a lot of it. And over here, the small part was Great Britain. Remember, if you see Great Britain, Britain, France, they're all the same thing. And the French and Indian War is actually a war between France and Great Britain. They started to fight over this area right here. Let's go to the next slide. And as always, guys, if you have a question, raise your hand, let me know. This is graded, this is worth points, so you want to make sure you're doing well with it. If you're not sure about something, come and let me know and I'll do my best to help you. So where we left off, we talked before about the different colonial regions. We had the southern colonies, which Virginia is a southern colony. We had the middle colonies and the New England colonies. And these colonies were different economic, political, and social structures, but all share these three things. Their belief in private property, which is the belief that you should be able to own your own land, so not the government owning it, the belief that one day when you graduate from high school, maybe you'll be able to buy land. That's what private property is. They also believed in free enterprise. That's where you can go out and get any job you want, you can start a business, you can go to school. Free enterprise, it's where, like I just said, you can, if you want to go to school and learn a trade, you can do that. If you want to start a business, you can do that, and you can get any job you want. And the fact that they were English colonists, which also means British subjects, so they were under control of England and Britain. Remember, the United States does not exist yet. We say it to represent this area, but it was not a country. All of this area, which New England colonies, middle colonies, southern colonies, this was all England. England controlled all of this. All the people who lived here were English. So there starts to be some problems with empire, which is England. So colonists, people from England living in the Americas, did not just trade with England. Colonists, which live over here, traded with France, so over here, traded with Spain, they traded with Holland, and others. However, England did not make money when colonists traded with other countries. England preferred that they just traded with England because they would make money. So, because England was not making money, they passed the Navigation Acts. And these are rules that England gave the colonists. Because England wasn't making money, they passed the Navigation Acts. And it stated all goods must be shipped in English or colonial ships. So they cannot have Spanish ships, they cannot have French ships. All of these ships have to be English or they have to be from the colonies. 75% of the crew had to be English or colonial. So you can have some Portuguese people on your boats, you can have some German people, some Russian people, but 75% of the crew had to be English or colonial. And crew, just so you guys know, are people who work on boats. That's what a crew is, people who work on boats. And the English colonists could export certain products, for example, tobacco, only to England. So if you grew tobacco in Virginia, the only place you were allowed to sell it to is England. If you sold tobacco to Spain, you would get in trouble. If you sold tobacco to, let's say, France, you would get in a lot of trouble. You were only allowed to sell tobacco to England. And England taxed all goods traded between colonists and other European countries. So if you lived in New York and you wanted to trade with England, no tax, it was fine. But if you lived in New York and you wanted to trade with another country like Spain, you had to pay taxes, so it was more expensive. Briefly going to talk about self-government in the colonies. This is kind of a review. So we talked about the Navigation Acts, however the English did not enforce them. At the time it was pretty expensive to get British soldiers there to enforce it, and this led the colonists to set up their own forms of government. So each colony had a governor, and their job included appointing, dismissing judges, monitoring colonial trade, and disbanding the local assembly. So this becomes important later because right now we're talking about self-government. That just means the people who lived here govern themselves. Even though they were English, they really didn't do much of what English said. England wasn't here very often, but that changes later. More about self-government. Each colony also had an assembly, for example, the House of Burgesses, and assemblies were elected by colonists. And when we say colonists, the only people allowed to vote were land-owning white males. Right? So if you're a female, if you're Hispanic, if you're African American, you were not allowed to vote. And not all whites were allowed to vote either. You had to own land. If you rented, if you were an indentured servant, if you didn't have a house and you didn't own property, you weren't allowed to vote. You had to be land owning. You had to own land and be white in order to vote. And what assemblies did is they wrote and passed laws, and they also controlled money spent by the governor. New England had town meetings and Mayflower Compact. Those are just some early examples. So now we're going to get into the French and Indian War and what the causes were. So both Great Britain and France wanted to control the Ohio River Valley. So this is all the Ohio River Valley right here. They wanted it because they wanted to expand their empires. France wanted to get bigger. England wanted to get bigger. But they also wanted the Ohio River, which is right here. It's good for trade. But because they both wanted it, they fought each other for it. And that's what the French and Indian War is. And it's called the French and Indian War because obviously they were fighting France. But France, if you remember, they got along with the Indians. So they got a lot of Indian tribes to help fight. So England was fighting the French, and they were fighting Indians. So here are some of the results from the war. Great Britain won the French and Indian War. So Great Britain won, France lost. Great Britain controlled all of Canada and all of North America east of the Mississippi River. So I'll show you a picture in a sec. But England had a lot of land now. And the Proclamation of 1763 was issued. And what this was is westward expansion by settlers beyond the Appalachian Mountains is prohibited, not allowed. So if you wanted to move west of the Appalachian Mountains, you weren't allowed to. You had to stay in certain areas. And there was also new taxes on legal documents like the Stamp Act, tea and sugar to pay the costs from the war and for British troops to protect colonists. Here's the picture I was showing you guys. So this is before the French and Indian War. You can see England, which is British American colonies, just had a little bit over here. And they had a good part of Canada. France, which is the orange, had all of this. And Spain is this green part right here. So after the French and Indian War, you can see all of this became part of England, became part of the British territories. And France gave up on all of this. They actually gave all of this to Spain. So Now we're going to talk about taxes. That's why I talked about it before class. Taxes are important. That's how you pay for wars. It's how you pay for roads. It's how the government pays for things. The government doesn't make money unless it taxes people. So the French and Indian War was very expensive and cost England a lot of money. To help pay the war debt, which is money owed, England started to tax the colonists. Remember, debt just as money owed. If I walk up to Oscar right now, or if I walk up to Jose and I give them $10, I'm in debt. I owe them $10. Debt just means you owe money. And another thing is England also had to pay for troops to stay in the colonies in case the French attacked again. England, if they took all their troops away, it would not be good if the French attacked again. So England had to keep troops there, which troops are not free. If you have soldiers, you have to pay for their food, and soldiers need to get paid. Soldiers aren't free. Do you think it was fair for England to tax the colonists? Should the English have to pay for this? Let me know what you think. Just write a quick sentence whether you think it was fair or not, and just say why. So here are some of the taxes. The first one was the Sugar Act of 1764. So Britain started charging tax on molasses, which is a type of sugar. This is molasses right here. And this made it difficult for people in New England to sell their rum. Molasses is what's used in rum. Rum is a drink, but they were not able to sell it anymore. There was also the Quartering Act of 1764. This act required that a homeowner had to allow soldiers into their house for free, and they had to provide food to the soldiers for free as well. So if the British soldiers were coming near your house, they were allowed to stay in your beds. You couldn't kick them out. And on top of that, they could kill the cow in your backyard and use it for food. Okay, they were allowed to stay in your house, and you had to feed them, and they didn't pay any money. So a lot of people didn't like that. Can you imagine if one day the United States Army knocks on your door and says, "Oh, we have to sleep on your bed," and they sleep on your bed, then they go to your fridge and eat all your food, then they leave in a couple of days? You wouldn't like that. It's actually illegal now, but back then, the Army was allowed to stay in your house and you had to feed them. There's also the Stamp Act of 1765, and you might be thinking of a stamp like that you put on envelopes. That's not what we're talking about. The Stamp Act required that colonists pay a tax on every piece of paper that was used. So if there was any paper, there was a tax on it. It's also the Townshend Acts, and these were a series of laws that started in 1767 that placed taxes on items such as lead, paints, and oil. So once again, it's just more taxes on certain products. There is the Tea Act of 1773. And this act made colonists pay a tax on tea. So if you bought tea, you had to pay a tax on it. How would you react to these taxes? Would you be happy? Would you be upset? Remember, in the United States, you pay taxes on everything you buy. But the people that were living in England at the time weren't used to paying taxes. So how would you react to these taxes? So this is the colonist response. Many colonists were unhappy with these taxes placed on them. And we're going to learn about the Boston Massacre. In 1770, many colonists from Boston, which is a city in Massachusetts, went to protest the presence of English soldiers that were in Boston. The colonists yelled at the British soldiers, threw sticks and also snowballs at them. The British soldiers shot into the crowd and killed 5 people and injured many more. Many colonists were upset about the Boston Massacre. So a lot of people from Boston went to protest, and the British soldiers shot and killed lots of them. This is a picture of the Boston Massacre. The people in the red, that's the British soldiers, and that's them shooting into the crowd. Next, there was the Boston Tea Party. On December 16, 1773, angry colonists dressed up as Native Americans and dump tea off English ships. So you remember there was a tea tax. So what they did is they dressed up as Native Americans, they went on the boats, and they dumped the tea into the ocean. And the English response to the Boston Tea Party, Britain was very upset at the Boston Tea Party. They weren't happy that all the tea was thrown into it. They lost a lot of money. And they made the Boston Port Act in 1774. And as a result, the British closed the Boston Harbor, which prevented the colonists from trading and making money. Remember, harbor is a place where a lot of boats go, and that's where a lot of trade happens. So that's where colonists would make money. But Britain closed the harbor because of the Boston Tea Party. And they also demanded that the people of Boston pay a total of $1 million for dumping the tea. And on top of that, England also did not allow Massachusetts to govern themselves after the Boston Tea Party. So you remember, that was a New England community. They had the town hall meetings, direct democracy. But now England said, nope. England was in charge of making all the laws for Massachusetts, not the people of Massachusetts. So England and the King of England, they're the ones who decided what happened there. They made the laws, and a lot of people there did not like it. So this kind of leads us up to where we're going next. A lot of people from the colonies were not happy with these new laws, with how they're being treated, with these taxes, and they start a revolution. So we're going to learn how the United States actually became a country and we broke away from England. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks.